Do you have the dog bark filter on over there?
I wish.
I
So
got my.
today's going to be real interesting because uh, my mother-in-law's here and my brother-in-law's here, which means they brought their dogs, which means barking, chaos. It'll be great.
I'm used
So
to that. I just locked my dogs out so they don't get to interrupt me. But I'll have your dogs.
yeah. Well, you'll hear barking. And it'll be great. So speaking of dogs, do you breed dogs?
We did during COVID. Yeah.
Oh, so you're done with that now?
Yeah, it was a lot of work. We bred Frenchies, and
Hmm.
really, we started because we didn't feel like we could afford a Frenchie, and we thought, hey, if we breed one and then have puppies, it'll pay for itself. And so yeah, we went down that route, and what happened was really my wife started working for iTech, our company, and then it was like impossible because it is for, especially for Frenchies. They require a lot of human contact, human hours to take care of them. They're not just puppies you can have and leave in a garage or wherever and expect them to raise themselves. But it was a great learning experience, that's for sure.
I bet. Yeah. And I'm sorry, guys. I've known Brian for years, so he and I can just start talking, because that's what we do. But everyone, this is Brian Weiss from iTech Solutions. Welcome, Brian. Can you give everyone a little bit of background on you and your company, and maybe maybe that'll help them understand why we're talking today.
Yeah. Well, we started iTech in '05. Before that, I was an independent contractor. And before, well, should I start way at the beginning?
Sure.
Started on computers in high school, actually. And my senior year, I had my one required period, and then I went around fixing computers the other periods. So I guess you could call me a teacher's pet. The teachers loved me because I fixed their computers.
Hmm.
And so right out of high school, I got a job at a little mom and pop shop, computer stuff. It was called, kind of a cool name.
Hmm.
And they serviced residential. They also did businesses. We built computers, right? I think I was building like 3 computers a day, trying to do multiple ones at a time. I got paid as an independent contractor there, so I got paid half of whatever they billed hourly. So if I could build 3 computers at a time, I'm technically multiplying my hourly rate by three, which was
Nice.
it was good and bad, right? It wasn't good to be having that much money when I was that young because I look back and I was like, I could have invested that better. I ended up buying a lot of a DJ equipment because I became a DJ, and I just spent it having fun, in my 20s. But
You're supposed to do that in your 20s, though, right?
I guess sure, why not? I was with the mom and pop shop for about 3 years and helped them grow to 3 stores. I guess what I quickly realized is there is this conflict between working on a residential computer versus what I called commercial back then. And like a business uses their computers to make money, and residential back then, I think it was MySpace, right? They're checking MySpace on their computer. And so, if Timmy's MySpace isn't working versus a computer can't get business done, you can see how there's a conflict there on which one should be worked on first. So I came up with this idea of let's create a commercial service department, is what I called it. And I took a group of engineers and we hired a couple more. I called them technicians back then. And we kind of just focused only on businesses. And so that was good. It helped them bring in a steady set of income that they're getting versus residential service. It's like you're waiting for their computer to not work and them being willing to pay money to fix it. And this is back in a day where computers were, you know, $2,000, maybe $1,500 if you're lucky. So people would buy them and just run them into the ground. I mean, I guess there's still that much depending on what ones you're buying. But the idea of life cycle management and proper maintenance, no matter how many times we use the car analogy of changing the oil, they just didn't get that. So typically, residential and even business, break fix, if you're in that industry, they're not really calling you unless they absolutely need you. But we helped them grow from 1 to 3 stores. And I needed, I guess, I don't know if I called it this back then, I needed to be more process based. There's things happening and slipping through the cracks that I was trying to come up with new ways to prevent, right? Which is a process. And again, I'm young, so I'm just learning as I go. I'm more of an engineer than I am a business-minded person at that time. And what happened is I would come up with these new processes, and I would follow them, and I'd get my engineers to follow them about half the time, mainly because the owner wouldn't follow them. So there wasn't buy-in from the owner of the company who's ultimately paying the paychecks. And I felt like I didn't have the ownership around maybe management, I guess. And the clients I had developed a good relationship with, right? And they see these mistakes happening. And I'm the one kind of stepping in saying, hey, we're going to prevent that from happening again. I'm working with the team on that. But then they'd still happen. So along the way, not being the business-minded person I was also told, hey, if you help me grow my business, I'll give you some ownership in it. So I'm thinking along this lines of, oh, cool, I might have some ownership. Well, 3.5 years later, after I helped them grow and open these stores, which I put in a lot of work I never got paid for because I was an independent contractor. I only got paid for the billable hours spent on clients. So, I'd work hours setting up a new store, checking, doing inventory, coming up with new processes. That wasn't paid. I wasn't on the clock. And so I put in a lot of my own kind of sweat equity into helping this business grow with the idea I might get some ownership. And at the end of the 3.5 years, I was basically told, oh yeah, you can have ownership if you want to buy in to the company. And for me, I'm good enough at math to understand, well, the time to buy in was when you're at 1 store, not when you're at 3 stores. And I asked the question of, well, does this new employee we just hired 2 months ago have this same opportunity to buy in? And he goes, yeah, of course. And I was like, oh, so I don't even get like a special deal when I buy in. So it was actually an emotional time for me because I was good friends with the owner, good friends with the clients, caught between a rock and a hard place where I'd put all this sweat equity into helping build something to be better, didn't have full control ownership-wise around trying to make better processes, and I'm seeing things fail that I couldn't help fix. So I made the hard decision to just leave and go off on my own as an independent contractor at 20, how old was I? 22 years old. And I was also DJing at the time. I started DJing when I was 21. I'll get to that in a bit. But that was a hard conversation. I even cried and left. Now I knew these clients didn't depend on the business. They depended on me and our team. And the clients weren't under any type of contract. There wasn't even that type of sophistication with this company. It was really just a break fix, call us when you need us, and more relationship based. So when I left, I told the owner this. I was like, hey, I got to inform these clients I no longer work for you. I'm going to tell them in this letter that they are a client of yours, and I want them to try to use you moving forward, but they're likely not going to have the same level of service. And what does that look like? That's part of the hard discussion I had with the guy. And so sure enough, I sent professional letters letting him know, like, at least give him a chance. Don't feel like you're just going to jump ship, because that makes me feel even worse that I'm leaving and taking clientele with me. That was definitely not something I wanted to be some sort of apparent thing I was trying to do. Well, what happened was I was kind of a rock at that place, and 4 of the technicians that worked under me left at the same time. And so naturally, the clients aren't getting the service that they would hope they would got. And almost immediately, several of them followed me. And now I'm an independent contractor working out of my garage doing computers. And that lasted for about 3 years, 3.5 years. I was making decent money. I think I was doing like 75 grand a year, 22 years old. Back in those days was a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Again, didn't spend it the smartest. I should have been buying property. When I look back on it, I was like, buy property. I think I was always intimidated, though, to be a homeowner or own property. I just didn't feel like I had that maturity in me, or didn't understand the game well as far as,
That's how I was too. Yeah.
you're kind of just like, is that me? I don't know. But I had fun with the money. And especially DJing, bought a lot of DJ equipment. I DJ'd from 2000 to 2008. Started out with turntablism, actually. That's what got me into it. A buddy of mine had a turntable, and he was scratching. I was like, wow, that's kind of fun, and got heavy into that. And then underground hip hop kind of followed that, and then it was like drum and bass, house music, kind of doing college parties. And then I started doing clubs, downtown bars in San Luis Obispo. There's kind of a big college scene there. So what I realized is no one wants to listen to my music. so I kind of pivoted, and I realized, all right, if I'm going to make money doing this, what does that look like? And I got into top 40 music, naturally. Top 40 R&B hip hop, I think is what I called it back in the day, is like the pop station. Wild 106 is still our local radio station. And so I started buying records I was always a turntable DJ. And I'd get these mix records that were easier to mix together. And then it kind of just blew up because we didn't really have that in that scene. I was one of the first kind of DJs on the scene, if you will, in our town. And there used to be like lines out the door, and they'd charge a door charge, and I'd get a cut of that, which was more money I didn't need. I think my biggest night I made like $2,000 DJing for 4 hours just because of all the people with the door money they'd pay. And then I got and then I started DJing at the radio station. I do the 5 o'clock traffic jam, weekends. So I had kind of a full plate where I was doing IT during the day, DJ at night, or on the weekends. And then I even got into weddings, doing DJing as well. But it was 2005. I'm getting to where we were starting out now. And feel free to interrupt me because I tend to monologue.
No, this is good, man.
Or if you want to dig into something deeper, let me know if I'm moving too fast. 2005, my clients, so I was growing and I needed employees. And I realized, okay, I can't be an independent contractor anymore. I need to start a business. And one of the technicians that had worked with me at Computer Stuff, when he left at the same time I left, he went to work for a web development company. And by the time I had wanted to start iTech, he was their lead web developer. And I was just kind of like putting all these pieces together in my head. My clients needed websites. I didn't want to do this alone because I had no idea how to run a business. And I respected the intelligence of this guy that, became a lead web developer while I was doing IT still. And I also had this, I was sick of dealing with clunky desktop apps, and I had this idea that, things should be web-based, really. Internet connections were fast enough at this time where we can really start putting applications hosted in the web, that we have a web browser interface that's a lot more lightweight to work with and more mobile, if you will, from a remote workplace perspective. So, and then one of my largest clients was part of this as well. So it was basically, he was the investor, silent investor. I brought in a bunch of clients. My other business partner, I guess he brought his website knowledge at the time. But we formed this company, and then really what he brought was the IP of what we were running on originally, because he helped develop all the initial software. So we developed all our tools initially, and ticket system, billing system, password management, documentation system. We had it tied into QuickBooks desktop, so we could bring everything in from a billing perspective. So we started this company in '05, and because I brought in a decent amount of clients already, the focus wasn't really, hey, let's grow IT. And again, mind you, 2005, we were still break fix. It was more, let's get web development going. Mainly because I had all these clients that needed websites too. They kept coming to me saying, hey, do you know who can do our website? We're ready to have a website. I think this was about the time where the .com boom was kind of over, but people realized I do need at least a website. Like if I don't have a website, who am I as a business type of thing? And so we just started landing all these website deals with our clients, pumping out websites. Our investor came from the marketing and jewelry industry, so he had a lot of connections that hooked us up in that area, where we even developed a survey platform that he was using for market research. Web really took off, and by 2008, when the recession happened, we had 5 employees on the web department, and it was still just me on IT. Because, hey, IT is running itself. We were focusing on web.
Yeah.
And now the recession hit, and this was like our first kind of like, oh, this is what it's like to run a business. It's not all roses. There's problems you run into. And it was really our first time we had to reinvent ourselves. Not that we didn't invent ourselves at inception, but we had to pivot for sure, because a lot of our income from web really was coming from the diamond and jewelry industry and marketing industries, which are probably the first thing to take a hit during a recession. Like, people pull back their marketing. You're not buying jewelry, I would imagine, right? And we didn't want to let go any employees. You'll understand as I tell my story, we've never really let go employees during the hard times. It's always been us kind of stepping in and weathering the storm, if you will, because we do have somewhat of a family culture, which has its pros and cons, but I like the pros more than the cons. And we've always been small enough to where it's easier to maintain that. When you get big enough, it's hard to maintain that type of culture. So we pivoted. I realized IT is not going away during a recession. We realized, how are we going to change web to be more recession proof? So with web, we pivoted to e-commerce. We built our own e-commerce platform. This is before Shopify was a thing. I don't even think WordPress was really a thing back then.
Not really. I mean, it was, but not the way it is today at all.
Yeah, because we had developed our own CMS platform as well, because we didn't have like a WordPress to fall back on per se. And so because we had built our own CMS, I skipped over that. We're like, oh, let's build our own e-commerce platform. And because the idea there is clients that are making money with their website, even during a recession, are still going to want to pay to maintain and manage their website. That's also around the time, well, it was a little bit later, we had one of our clients that had a SaaS platform they had developed. We didn't call it that back then, but they were doing CEUs, continuing education units. And we had built out a learning platform for them where they could deliver the content and issue the credits, and then they had a licensed professional that would create the content. So on the website, we started diversifying, right? Like, how can we focus on things that are going to have recurring income? And then same thing on the IT side. How can I get recurring income on the IT side? I didn't know anything about the MSP channel. I don't even know if it really existed in '08 too much. But
Probably not.
looking back, that's maybe when we could call ourselves an MSP, because I went to my clients and I said, hey, you're paying us X amount per year on average. That's X amount per month. And I actually took about a 3-year span and averaged it out to be more realistic. And how about if we put you on the support plan that's fixed price per month, and then that way I have income to be able to grow with, and not worry about going out of business. This is literally the discussion I was having with my clients because I had a good relationship with them. They wanted me to succeed. I could scale easier. I could know when is the next time to hire the next employee. And then I'm helping them eliminate peaks and valleys in their expenses around IT. And that was probably the first time I even got into life cycle management as a thing, where we're not waiting for things to die before they get replaced. Because now I'm holding, I'm holding the bag when it comes to how many hours I'm spending on a client's infrastructure, and if they've got really old equipment, that's going to require more hours. And so we got into this idea of not letting them age older than 5 years and kind of setting up that plan. And then that's when we bought our first tool. Before this, we developed all our own tools, and that was an RMM. And it was primarily because we didn't feel like we had the sophistication from a dev perspective to develop an RMM, an agent that would run on a Windows operating system. We were still very much kind of web-based development that we were doing. Everything we developed was on a LAMP stack. It was Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So that was our expertise. The minute you start getting into an agent, running on Windows, you're like C++, like it's a different programming language. So we ended up getting an RMM, and back then they were sold as a perpetual license with a follow-up maintenance per year. So I think we dropped like 65 grand for this platform. And then yearly after that, I think it was like, wasn't much, maybe 2 or 3 grand a year for maintenance. And we even came up with our own branding. We're like, this is called iTech Net Manage. We're selling you, we on the invoice, it had to look a certain way. So Net Manage was our kind of, our RMM and monitoring and everything, and remote access, and then we created iTech Safe Backup, is what we called it, and that was like our backup service, and then for the for the support model, we called it iTech Sentinel Maintenance. Sentinel was, I think, Matrix is where we got that from. Maybe, I don't know. Sentinel's not the greatest thing to use when it comes from the Matrix, but. I think
Sentinel's great, man. Like it sounds like I don't know, when I hear Sentinel, I think of X-Men. Do you remember the
Okay,
X-Men
there you go.
cartoon?
Yep.
I think of those big scary machines, and I'm like, man, if you're running one of those, you're probably good. I mean,
Well, and so the funny thing too is working at the radio station. I've always had all these different things going on. They had me doing a lot of gigs that I didn't want to do because they paid like minimum wage. And I said, how about we trade advertisement? Right. So we had all this free advertisement, and we even ended up doing the radio station's websites. So we'd get like 3 to 4 commercials a day on the radio station. And so the minute we branded those products, they're like on the radio, iTech Safe Backup. Yeah, I still have all the old commercials we did. That was a fun time. And so that took off fairly well, because now all of a sudden we're getting guaranteed income, both on the web side, because we pivoted on the web too. We went from project based to we took what a typical project would cost and we divided it out by 12 months, and we'd make it a monthly cost, and we'd get them to renew it, making sure we showed value for them to renew it. And then IT was kind of the same thing. So we shifted to this project break fix income model to a recurring revenue model during the recession, really using it as a way for our clients to help control their costs around these things they need, and then helping us control our income so we can scale properly. So 2008, I'd say 2000, and then I hired my first employee in 2008 for IT, I should say. And we actually were able to stay 2 employees for about 2 years. We had my brother come work for me for a little bit. 2012 is probably when we started hiring more employees for IT. I almost want to call us kind of still a lifestyle business back then. we didn't, other than building a brand equity, we weren't well versed in like scaling our company from a sales perspective. And we were just happy paying the bills and keeping our clients happy. And in all fairness, you get kind of comfortable when there's a steady stream of income coming in every month, and it's paying, it's paying enough of your bills where you're not having to chase projects all the time. So 2012, we started ramping up web even more, because the CEU company that we started, well, we didn't start a company yet. The CEU company we were working with, we created an offshoot of another company. I think they were called Quantum, and we were called iTech. Obviously, I know that. And so we put it together and we called it QTech. Because that's what do you do when you take two companies? You throw their name together. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so we took their business model, which we saw doing really well, and we said, we're going to repeat that over and over again. And so we did it in 3 or 4 different industries. One of them was pest control, believe it or not. I mean, CEUs, you could pick your industry. Certain industries need them, and it's just a matter of finding a licensed professional that can write the content. We're delivering the platform, and it's really, that's what I love about SaaS platforms. If I own one myself, I should say, they're mailbox money.
They really are, yeah.
You do all the development up front, and then it's all about how much market share can we get from here on out. And so we grew to, the next 3 years, we focused on growing that. We hired more employees. I'd say we were probably about 6 IT employees and maybe like 7 web by the time 2014-15 rolls around, where now all of a sudden they can't keep up with our needs from an IT department perspective around the custom developed software that we had built for ourselves. And we were starting to see the roadmap just slow down. This whole time, mind you, we're also managing our own roadmap for our products that we're using with our clients other than our RMM to help make things more efficient, bake more processes in. As we discovered better processes, it's like, okay, now let's bake this into the tool so that there's less human error that can happen, and the process is more repeatable. And I really wanted dashboards as kind of my next step, because we were starting to collect so much data. We had built this out enough to where we're just dealing with lists of data everywhere. All the different functions in it produces a list of data, and then what do? You analyze it, you figure out how to adjust it, you're sorting it, what's the next thing I need to work on.
So you started chasing that coveted single pane of glass.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that, right? I mean, the dashboards kind of give you a lot of data in a single view, and then the idea is you drill down to get to the list instead of starting with lists. And we had even tracked financially how much work the dev department was doing, because we tracked them as separate entities. I skipped over the fact we bought out my business, our silent investor, in 2008. So it was just my web department buddy that's running the web department, and me. So I ran IT, he ran web, and that we were kind of running them as separate companies. And then we would meet together like quarterly, talking about how things are going and what we're going to do with each department. And so on the books, they would bill us for all the work that they did for us, because naturally he could be doing cash projects instead. And that's exactly what happened. It was like, hey, do you want us to really do work for this internal project where, yeah, you're giving us money, but it's just our money anyway, so it's not like new money coming in? Or do you want us to focus on these cash projects where we can actually grow and make more income? And the natural answer was, okay, it sounds like you've outgrown us. Our money isn't worth anything to you anymore. But on the books, I was spending about $6,000 a month with all the dev work and roadmap stuff that they were doing for us.
That's not bad.
And so, but that was my budget, right? I'm going to go find off-the-shelf tools. 2015 is really when I first got introduced to the MSP channel. before that, we were kind of on our own island in the sense that figuring out things on our own, not realizing there's a community out there of other people struggling to do the same thing we are.
Hmm.
And, and, and so I came across Autotask PSA at that time, which had just launched dashboards. And I said, that is what I wish my guys could do. So I'm just going to get that, which naturally one thing leads to another. I'm definitely a shiny tool guy. And I mean, we were developing our own tools. I know the value in a good tool. And we probably adopted 4 or 5 other tools along with it, including CentraStage back then before Datto bought them.
Hmm.
And so within 2 years of adopting these tools, we grew 50% on the IT side. And then web grew tremendously too. And so it was like 2017. We probably had we had about 24 employees, and we were about 2.8 million across the whole company. And but we're at a point now where I'm not relying on dev anymore. They're kind of doing their own things. My partner and I is just meeting quarterly. We're kind of running 2 companies within the same company, and we had different personalities too. So it was good personalities that balanced each other. I'm more of a risk taker. I'm more the life of the party guy. My business partner was more reserved and kind of did not like taking risks. And so I was wanting to start making some moves that were a little hard to convince him to do. He was at the point where I don't think he even liked having employees. Maybe I'm more of a people person than he was. You could say that too. I don't want that to come off sounding bad. More
No, but
outgoing.
I get it, man. Some people are more introverted and
Yeah.
would rather just, for lack of better term, they would rather just be in mom's basement in the dark with their lines of code in front of them.
Okay. You said it. Yeah, no, I like the introvert versus extrovert. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was definitely more extroverted, which extroverted people probably tend to take a little more risk. And I was wanting to grow, and he was more, I'm happy where I'm at. I want to do more with less. And so that's when we really started talking about, well, what does this look like? Interestingly enough, we looked at our books, and it was split right down the middle with IT and web, to where we could basically part ways, and we're not really having to buy each other out at all, as far as value goes. The funny thing is, the QTech company, kind of a third part, which was under the web umbrella of the company. So, even though web and IT, QTech was under web, it was making more net profit with a single employee than both of the web and IT were combined. So I was like, I've always wanted a SaaS company, and you're telling me we're going to split, and I'm going to lose my SaaS ownership in a SaaS company. So I kind of made him hang on for a little longer. I was like, nope, don't want to split. But it only took about another year before I started. It gave me a year to think about, like, what would it be like if I owned this company on my own? And I started realizing a lot of things that having a business partner was holding me back. You know, every dollar we made, we split, right? 50%. That means every dollar we spent came out of our pocket 50%. So not only, am I splitting the income, and every time we spend money, it's got to be something we both agree on to really spend it.
Hmm.
Otherwise you end up with some bad blood there, like, oh, you're spending too much in this area.
But the nice thing is, with him being more conservative and less of a risk taker, you may have been more profitable when you were with him versus maybe the next 2 years after you guys split. Maybe.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, but there's an outside force that caused that, which I'll jump right into here in a minute. I will say that we did balance each other well, and he taught me enough about being conservative with money. You know, because mind you, I came out of high school making way too much money. You know, so I never had the appreciation for money. It just came too easy to me, and so he taught me to be responsible with money though. So when we did split, it's not like I just went to Vegas and just started spending money left and right. Like, you know, yay, I don't have a business partner telling me I can't spend money. So, you know, I was also very privy to what you're allowed to write off and not allowed to write off. So I wasn't doing all these crazy things where I'm spending company money that hasn't been taxed yet and trying to act like it's going to be a write-off for me. But we parted ways. Our last year together was 2017. That's also right when we moved into a new office. We kind of split, and in March of 2018, we had our RMM that we were actually moving away from because it didn't support MFA without this crazy, antiquated third-party product that it required that we did not want to deal with. And we were about halfway moving our clients off of it before there was a undisclosed vulnerability about said RMM. Undisclosed, we didn't know about it. Threat actors apparently knew about it, and we had half of our clients ransomed. So was I happy for the first 3 months that I was running my own company and calling all the shots? Yay! But now I get to call all my shots during this crazy security incident, and I'm by myself. So yeah, we did end that year with a negative 3% profit margin. To your point, yeah, the minute that we split, I wasn't making money, but it wasn't entirely my fault. That was a wake-up call for us. I think what happened when I look back on that is, you know, we immediately realized, first of all, luckily we were at our turning point. So our recurring income paid for all of our expenses. Projects were more just icing on the cake. And so that's one of the main reasons we survived. The other main reason is the relationship we had with our clients. We only lost one client out of the 35 that were affected. But I realized that I immediately, the minute I broke loose from him, I've got this mindset, I want to grow. This is back in the, you know, well, Robin Robbins is still around, but, you know, Robin Robbins like, sell, get more clients. And I realized, well, wow, what am I doing to protect the income we already have? And what type of shared risk do I have with my clients? What type of risk does this income have of going away overnight? Well, I quickly understood that. It wasn't really known that threat actors were targeting IT departments. It was kind of it was a moment where it made sense. Oh yeah, of course they're going to come after me because I got the keys to the kingdom of a bunch of other clients. Why wouldn't they? But it wasn't talked about in the MSP channel. I was very involved in the MSP channel because all these products we adopted, I naturally wanted to be on the partner advisory boards with the idea that I just got done developing my own products and I want to help them develop theirs better. So we got a ton of good support from the industry from a how do we pivot and prevent this from happening again. But even our insurance company was not prepared for this. This was like the early days of when this started happening. And when I called my insurance company up, they literally just told me, all right, well, we understand what's going on. Go ahead and remediate it. Track all your expenses and get back to us when you're done, and we'll finish out your claim. There was no, here's a legal team. Here's a negotiator for the threat actors. Here's a security team, a SOC to come in, or an IR team, I should say, to come in and help you. They didn't have any of that prepared, and I actually had to force them to find a company for me because I was going to do my own remediation, but I wanted them to bring in a company that verified my remediation was up to par.
Sure.
I wasn't a security expert. I mean, we did firewalls and antivirus back then. And so they ended up bringing Solus Security in back then, right? I think that's kind of when Solus was getting started out. They're much bigger now. and they ended up verifying everything. But it took 2 weeks to remediate, and then probably another 2 weeks to kind of get the wheels back on the bus, if you will, to start moving forward. But it made me realize that I don't want to take on new clients right now. I need to like figure out how I'm not going to go out of business. And so it was rebuilding the trust with clients that, hey, this isn't going to happen again because of X, Y, Z. And what does that mean? Well, really, I had to dive into a security framework. So CIS was the one that I got introduced to by Brian Weiss. He was a big help during that time. And really just tried to understand, what do we need to do to add more layers of protection, or even be able to detect better what might be going on so we can respond better and mitigate overall damage. And we spent the next 2 years really hardening our house. I kind of sadly went crazy with tools. I was like throwing a tool at everything in the beginning. Before Ryan, he's like, come here, Brian, let me talk to you about a security framework. It's not all about tools, buddy. It's like there's people and processes involved as well. And so it took me a little, the first year, I think that's probably around when we met, believe it or not, because I remember going to some of your forums with my big 40-layer
Oh my
stack.
gosh, that list was insane,
I
man.
had this, and
Like,
I was so proud of it, though.
you really were.
I was like, here's my 40 layers that are going to prevent this from ever happening again.
Man.
I
And
was
I know
really,
ogres are like onions, but man, that was a lot of layers.
yeah. I think, a lot of it was me looking for external validation too, because I felt lost, and no one was, I just shared everything about I went to DattoCons and, any event I could go to, told my story. I didn't want it to happen to other people. I was hoping to learn something along the way. So I was just kind of an open book, just trying to, and a big sponge.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you think about it, at that point in your life, you were probably experiencing some serious imposter syndrome, which I know something about. You had a big catastrophic event happen that made you question, are we actually good at what we do? Whether you said it out loud or not, that's probably one of the questions that was going through your mind at that point. And at that point, you had a few different paths you could have gone down, and you chose the path of, let me chat with my industry peers. Let me start making sure we're protected. And like you said, you might have overdone it a little, but I think there's something to be said about the fact that you were trying. You know what I mean? Like you were taking security seriously after that event,
Yeah.
which unfortunately it takes an event for that to happen. But um, yeah, I mean, I think that speaks volumes to your character, man.
Yeah, it's definitely some resilience. I think you need that in our industry. So it, it was, we just didn't take on clients for 2 years, which kind of sucks because you get out of the practice of doing sales. They say you should
Mhm.
never stop selling. I know what that feels like, because the minute we started selling again, I was like, what? How do I sell again? I'm talking to a new client. How am I going to approach this? And really, sadly, it was all about cybersecurity. So it was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and trying to scare clients into using your services. Otherwise, they might lose their business overnight, and that's not the right way to go about it.
No,
I
because unfortunately they kind of like they'll wake up one night and go, "Did I just get scammed?" And
yeah,
now they're stuck in a contract that they don't want to be in.
yeah, and it, I'll tell you, other than just the passion of feeling like, okay, wow, I went from doing IT to help businesses be more efficient and implement technology for efficiency to now I'm in IT to help protect them from the threat actors. It probably gave me a different outlook where I felt like a superhero that needed to save everyone. And how do I save everyone? Scare them about the villains. Tell them how bad the villains are. So, I mean, it was education that needed to be made, but I think in hindsight, and even during that time, I started not liking it. It wasn't what I originally got into IT for. It wasn't cybersecurity. That's not why I got into IT. And really, we're trying to talk clients into spending more money to take conveniences away. So that was a struggle, right? We still grew 15% gross revenue year over year after that event because we were really focusing on our existing client base and getting them their infrastructure hardened. But at that negative 3% profit margin, it took us 2 years to get back up to our kind of target 10% we had always maintained a minimum of. And so yeah, 2 years later, we're end of 2019, and we're like, all right, this is our last year where we feel like we're putting the pieces back together, right? What's 2020 going to look like? I don't know if anyone knows.
2020 was a fun
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. So, beginning of 2020, we got this optimistic, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We've got our stack, down from 40 layers to maybe, 15, because we were all over the place. We had this, idea of what things look like. We had gotten plenty of feedback from peers in the industry where we didn't feel like we were as crazy anymore. That was definitely some humility that I went through there, which is good. Humility's good in this industry. It helps keep you grounded. That's something I'm focusing on today, even being grounded. And so 2020 rolls around.
So is my son.
Yeah?
He's grounded.
Oh. I'm trying to avoid that type of grounded, but and that would come from my wife these days. So 2020 rolls around. I'm trying to think back. I remember like the early days of COVID. Right, you hear about the news first coming from China, and you're like, oh, China, that's not going to come here. You're like, oh, is that real? And before you know it, it's here. Mm-hmm. And I think it was like mid-February, end of February, we started, getting affected in our area. Now we live in California, so if there's going to be any mandates, coming from the government, they're coming in California first, out of any other state probably. Mm-hmm. So we saw it right away. We had these new OSHA rules we had to follow. I've never tried to bring politics into my business with my clients or employees, so we had to definitely wade the line of like, hey, we respect whatever you believe, but we got to follow these OSHA rules. And yeah, COVID, if you get COVID, you're like at home for, I think it was 2 weeks back then, or maybe a week. Like you can't.
I think it was 2, yeah.
2 weeks.
It was something ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, stay away, and that sucked because we had a great culture that was really an in-office culture. We were lucky that we had migrated 100% to Teams, even for our phone system by then. And so we pivoted to all of our meetings being virtual. We started this iTech Cares meeting, which we still have today, actually. Monday morning, half an hour. Friday morning, a half an hour, where you're on the clock and you're not supposed to talk work, and it's just kind of a check-in, water cooler time, if you will. The idea of Monday was like, how was your weekend? What'd you do? Kind of trying to keep the team connected outside of just work topics. And then Friday,
yeah, because you're all remote now at this point.
Yeah.
Like you said, you had this in-office culture, and now thanks to COVID, everyone's working from home. And you being in California, I mean, again, we don't have to talk politics, but I think you guys were stuck being home the longest. And yeah, I mean, I think the iTech Cares thing, I think that's great that
No.
you were trying to promote the camaraderie between all of your team members still.
Yeah. I think it worked well. I mean, we still have it, and they still enjoy it. We are excited. We just bought an office that we're going to be moving into in January. We're going to kind of do a back to the office after what, it'll be 25 years, 5 years remote, and then we're back in the office. I'm looking forward to
Why?
that. Why?
Yeah, why go back to the office?
So when I think about it, you know, the problem we have right now is there's way too many meetings, virtual, internal with our team, and the meetings cause a delay in getting work done. Typically because there's things that need to be discussed in the meetings to move the ball forward, and it's harder to if you're all working in the same office and there's something small you need to talk to someone else about. Typically you're looking for a chance when they're not in front of their computer or walking around, or you notice they're free and you're just walking up to them. Hey, got 5 minutes? Let's talk about this real quick. When you're remote and you don't have a visual on your team, you're kind of in your own island, and you're having to ping them on Teams, which, by the way, we have developed very good Teams etiquette at our company where we don't constantly interrupt each other. We're respectful, and or set up a small meeting or do this or do that. But we operate on a triage dispatch model now where everything gets scheduled out for our engineers. So their schedules are typically all full anyway. So the only time you have for internal communication are these scheduled meeting times that always happen on this one day of the week. And so it causes things to back up that wouldn't normally back up. And then you're trying to cram everything into a single meeting, right? When things are top of mind in the middle and you're in the office, they're a lot quicker and easier to talk about. When you've got something top of mind, you need to talk about, and it's got to wait for another meeting. What are you doing? Maybe making a note about it on an agenda so you talk about it. But it's like warming up a car. You get into the meeting and you got to warm up that car to remember all those things that you were hoping to talk about just on a whim, and so it takes longer, and luckily we have AI now. So it takes very detailed notes. But before we had AI, it was even harder because unless someone was taking good notes in the meeting, things would be forgotten. And then there'd be even further delays caused. There's also an aspect of the type of culture we have is kind of a family culture that we like to promote and have. And could you imagine living with your family remotely? You wouldn't be living with them, right? It would feel like a different family if you only saw each other on video and you had to schedule time with each other all the time. So there's a human aspect, a social connection that you really lose when you're a remote company. Now, there's some lines of business where that's acceptable. I mean, if I had a dev company where all they did is lines of code all day long, how much interaction do you really need? When you're a customer-centric company and you deal with people all day long and trying to keep people happy, that's going to affect the quality of service if your team can't be around each other, physically on a regular basis. If they're hindered by technology to provide a better quality of service in a customer-centric, environment. These are just things I've noticed. It can be done remotely. It's not the type of culture we want to have, though. It hinders it, I feel like. I don't know.
So you've brought up the term engineers a few times, and I want to dig into that a little bit because I remember seeing an argument somewhere, and I don't remember which forum it was in, um, that MSPs should not be calling their technicians engineers because an engineer is something that you had to get a certification or a degree or something to get. And sure, there are software engineers, but an engineer is a special term, and the guy that's working on firewalls is probably not an engineer. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever thought about that at all?
Oh yeah, my brain's a storm of ideas. It thinks about things all the time. I mean, we used to call our employees technicians. I mean, we've been through the gamut: system administrators, network engineers, you know, level 1, 2, and 3. That's still kind of used. I think I think where I fall back to engineer is really high level in how we think. We think like engineers, regardless of what our role is. Our brains work like an engineer. My brain
Hmm.
still works like an engineer, even though I'm supposed to be a CEO. So I get into the weeds sometimes, which I like. I like getting in the weeds, but really a
Sure.
CEO's role is to not be in the weeds all day long, you know? So, engineer, I think of it as we want to know how things work. We understand that things work based on a process. We reverse engineer things all the time to understand how they work better. Technician to me, why we got away from that is it's almost a little demeaning to me from the value that my employees actually bring to the table on the service delivery machine department. I was thinking machine because what I was going to say is technicians typically are working on some sort of machine, right? Like I think of like a car technician, for example. Like you wouldn't call a mechanic an engineer because the motor's already been engineered to work a certain way, and they're more of a technician working on the motor, right? But
Hmm.
but when you think about it, we're not dealing with out of the box solutions that work like a fixed motor in a car. We're dealing with an operating system, line of business software that runs on the operating system. Let's talk about the drivers that the operating system needs to use to interface with the hardware, which is a gamut of different types of hardware we run into all day long. So we're really having to engineer a way to keep the computer running with a bunch of different moving pieces that aren't always the same. And when a problem happens, we have to reverse engineer why that problem might have happened to understand it better. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but in my head, as I'm talking about it off the top of my head, that's kind of where I fall and why I call them engineers.
I don't think I'm looking for a particular answer. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I don't, I don't really have a dog in this fight. I don't care one way or another. Um,
Well,
I s-
you do have some dogs that your family brought over.
they're fighting. Yes. Um, you mentioned earlier that you know you were kind of running a lifestyle business at one point.
Hmm.
I would argue that you still are. And hear me out. I think every CEO is running a lifestyle business to a certain degree because look at what what these people are doing, like look at look at Mark Zuckerberg. Look at the house he lives in and all the cool stuff he does. I mean, that's a lifestyle. Now, he probably works his ass off like 80 hours a week, like he probably lives to work at Meta, right? Um, and that's okay because that's his family has accepted that. That's his lifestyle. You've got a certain lifestyle too. I don't know how much you want to reveal to the public about your lifestyle, but I you've done well for yourself. You've got nice things, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Whether you're running a $120,000 company or a $3 million company or a $10 billion company, it all could be a lifestyle business depending on how you as a person are kind of looking at things.
Yeah, I mean, I think any business owner is running their business so that they can maintain a certain personal lifestyle.
Hmm.
I, I think where I was using the term earlier is your business itself big enough to maintain a lifestyle that you're happy with to where you're not really caring to grow and scale it and make it better,
Gotcha. Okay.
right?
Do you think there's something wrong with people that are at that point?
Not at all. It's the heart of
Okay.
America. Yeah. Lifestyle small businesses, that's the heart of America. And it's typically where you get the better quality of service because it's more relationship based, right?
Hmm.
The minute you try to start growing and scale, I would say at least half the time you're starting to leave that relationship. You're maybe your clients are turning more into numbers than names, right?
Now, what would you say? Um, Gosh, I want to tread lightly here, and it's not you. So we know a guy who I feel like probably is just running a lifestyle business, but keeps telling himself that he wants to grow. But also at the same time, he just keeps falling further and further behind when it comes to IT knowledge.
Yeah, I've been there before. I mean, especially in the earlier days. When I first started iTech, I had no idea what it was like to grow a business. I just thought, hey, now that I have a business name and I can hang my shingle up that I'm a business, that I'm just going to grow one day, right? Without even having to learn how to grow. And it really took me, a recession, a security incident, COVID, the Great Resignation, which I didn't talk about, where we lost half of our staff. And it takes those hard pains to really give yourself humility that maybe you don't got this, and maybe you need to rethink what it really means to grow and run a business. No one's just going to hand you money because you have a business name or because you have a set of skills that you might be overconfident about even. It I in my mind, what I've learned up until today, and where we're going with our business is, and especially in the IT industry, there's kind of two convergences happening. You're either going to fall in line with a commoditized model, which means you're not really offering much more value than your competitor, who's also commoditized, and it's a race for market share. And how are you getting that market share, right? Or you're actually developing some real IP that's differentiating yourself from your competitor. And the MSP channel has done a great job at commoditizing MSPs. So we've stepped away from the MSP channel a bit because the intellectual conversations I've been trying to have about the things I'm learning and the direction I want to go with our company haven't been welcomed too well. They've been hit with criticism, and a kind of a you're doing it wrong, and why would you do that? We're a Microsoft first shop, so there's a lot of like, why are you putting all your eggs in one basket, right? And I'm like, well, it's better than 20 different baskets with all these half-baked MSP channel products that I know firsthand really are half-baked and they're not getting better because I've been on
Sure,
all the partner advisory boards.
sure. No, now hold on a second though. So you say you're a Microsoft first shop, and there's nothing wrong with being Microsoft first. Um, the part that I would caution you in, when you think about the fact that all of your eggs are in one basket, they're all in the Microsoft basket. Okay, so if you were to look at, um, let's just say a company that rhymes with Matto, and you put all your eggs in that basket, right? And then they get purchased by a company that rhymes with Kaflea, and and now your eggs are in a basket you don't want them in, right? So I get that, because right now what's happening in the MSP industry is there's a lot of like consolidation happening with a lot of the MSP products, and I think the reason for that is, um, let's be honest. A lot of these companies are startups that the CEO has a goal. He has a goal of, I want to get this valuation. I want to sell it for this much, and I'm gonna make a big nest egg, right? And when you look at companies like Microsoft, they're much larger, they're more established. They're not looking for an exit because they're already a publicly traded company. So I get that. But let's look at another behemoth, okay, of a company. And I'm not going to say Apple. CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is not an MSP first company, right? They are a company that's publicly traded, and there are many MSPs that had their eggs all in that basket. And when CrowdStrike had that big crash, a lot of MSPs kind of were in a pickle, right? So that's my only thought is it doesn't matter if all of your eggs are in an MSP basket or an enterprise basket, shit can still hit the fan.
Yeah, I would say with the studying I've done about security frameworks and around cybersecurity, first of all, I want to point out that competition has ruined cybersecurity, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Antitrust laws should have never been allowed to be passed by the EU, or the EU Commission should have never forced Microsoft to open up the kernel the way they did. A good analogy is, you know, and it's not CrowdStrike's fault. They just took advantage of a market that was there to compete with, other third-party security products where Defender wasn't really up to par back in the day anyway, right? But if you look at how far Defender's gone and you look at Defender as the Secret Service who is protecting the president, we shouldn't really have a situation where third-party security companies are saying, no fair, I should be able to protect the president at that sensitive level as well. It creates single points of failure. And I think to your point, no matter where your eggs are, how many different baskets they're spread in, and whether they're in one basket or not, really what we have to start looking at is what are our single points of failure. And that's really what happened with the global outage, is there was a single point of failure. Now, could there be a single point of failure with Microsoft? Of course. Microsoft could come out with a Defender update that did the same thing that CrowdStrike would. However, it's Microsoft's kernel. So who are you going to trust that's going to come out with an update that's not going to cause a kernel issue? Is it going to be a third-party company that's growing on the stock market and has capitalism at its back to try to make numbers to compete with other third-party security products, right? The minute you start getting competition in cybersecurity, that's when walls start going up. People aren't sharing information. What about IOCs, indicators of compromise? Why are third-party security companies having indicators of compromises of threat actors that they're not sharing with other third-party security companies, and they're using as the IP to drive up their stock price? Do you think a state in California or a state in the U.S., if there was a criminal in California that went over to Nevada, California is going to be like, sorry, we're not going to share you any information about that criminal that just entered your state because we've got IP we need to protect because it helps us be worth more money from a security standpoint, right? So, it goes up all the way up to capitalism, I guess, right? And the fact that this was allowed in cybersecurity. So, but let me use another analogy. So, why are we Microsoft first, Defender first? Now, they can't do everything. We augment Defender with ThreatLocker, shirt I'm wearing, right? I love third-party security products that don't try to displace or compete with Defender. Because if you've already got a bouncer inside the room with you, why are you going to fire that bouncer to depend on a bouncer that's outside of the room that has to ask Microsoft for permission every time just to come in the door to protect you? Right? That's another single point of failure. Different from the kernel level, where third-party security has to maintain permission with the Microsoft operating system or even Microsoft 365 tenant to protect you. There's an Azure Enterprise app for any third-party security that is a single point of failure. If you had an insider threat or a threat actor that gained a high enough level of permissions, they could delete that enterprise app and blind your third-party security product. So when I think about a stoic approach, I knew you were wanting me to get to this. Is we really need to avoid the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is really the smoke and mirrors that you see in cybersecurity around why one company says they're a better security company than the other, and they're competing with each other when really they should be sharing information so that we can rise the tides. Or on the opposite side, FOMO, fear of missing out, something you may not have yet that you feel like you need, like my 40 layers of security that I jumped to, right? Where now I've just overcomplicated my life and maybe added like several layers, single points of failure, and all these things I'm not even thinking about. My threat landscape's bigger now. You know, I got 40 vendors I'm working with versus 15. You know, that's a bigger threat landscape to manage. So my idea with the Stoic approach to technology is, and you look at a security framework, it doesn't care about users and devices. Really, those are cattle. I never tell a human they're cattle, a user account, let's call it that. User accounts and devices from a security framework aspect, they don't care about them. Now, if you're storing data on a device, then naturally it cares about that. But now you're understanding where I'm going. All it cares about is data. And so where does all your data live? And the users and devices are typically vectors to that data. So the more applications you use, I also blame Apple. I'm in a blame game today, if you haven't noticed.
Now, hold on a second. You leave my beloved Apple be.
Okay, here's one criticism that I'm hoping you can't argue with. Apple came out with this commercial that they thought was great, and it kind of was fun at the time, but now I'm looking back at it and I hate it. They taught a whole generation that there's an app for that, right? So you have this generation that comes into the workforce and wants to do more with technology, and maybe they're not getting the support from their manager or IT, and they're just finding their own app to solve their problem. And therein lies shadow IT is another thing we're battling with today. So how many apps are you using, and where's all your data dispersed, and how big is your threat landscape, and how do you build a security framework around that? Well, the easiest thing to do is to talk about it in users and devices. We're not going to care about where the data is. And by the way, it's hard to sell security with a data-centric focus. It's a much different conversation. And how do you even price that out? It's much easier to say, our service costs X amount per user or X amount per device. Now go scale with that, right? It's really a commoditized approach to security, in my opinion. But the minute you start talking about data, it's like, whoa, we can't even give you a price yet until we understand where all your data is. And first we got to figure out all the apps you're using. You know, and then we figure out where your data is. And then we understand, okay, what is that going to cost to actually secure? Well, the next logical step is, well, there's user accounts and devices accessing those apps that access that data. So there is some reasonable aspect, or there's some reasonable thought in that approach, but it's not really the core thing that a security framework needs to protect. So a Stoic approach would be, let's not just throw more tools and more layers of security so we can sleep better at night. Let's understand, do we even need all these apps? Do we even need our data dispersed in the way that it is? What's the value that we're getting out of doing this, other than the fact we just allowed this to get out of hand because everyone and their mom at your company decided to go get an app that they thought was going to help them, when really there should have been a better leadership approach and oversight to make sure we're trying to keep all the horses in the stable, right?
No, that's good, man. So the only thing I want to say, on the Apple stuff is I'm torn. You said earlier you hate the EU and all their antitrust stuff. I'm torn. Okay. On one side, I agree. I think that if they keep going after Apple for things, they're going to ruin what makes Apple
Yeah,
Apple.
100%.
But I gotta say, I really love that I've got USB C on my iPhone instead of Lightning. And I love that I now have RCS communication, whatever it's called, so I can do rich messaging with my Android friends. Those losers. Uh, but on, at the same time, like, I don't love that they've made it so in the EU you can use a third party app store. Like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah, I some of those I agree with. I mean, some of them I wouldn't consider security, right? I mean, Lightning port versus USB-C.
Yeah, I don't think that was for security. I
Yeah,
think that one was they were trying to make it so that I don't know why it mattered. I really
yeah.
don't. I think they were trying to make it so that way all consumer devices were standardized across the same type of port.
And they should be, because I hate carrying multiple chargers. I love
Yeah.
Apple devices. Well, I should say I like iOS. I
Hmm.
started out with Macs in high school. That's all I knew and worked on before I got involved with delivering business services in IT, where no one was really using Macs. Now I love Windows and Microsoft, but I use iOS for mobile, and I really don't trust Google, at all. Especially a lot of the stuff I've been reading lately. Paper that Robert Epstein put out with his project really
The one
opened
with the
my eyes.
island.
I knew you were going to say that. Different Epstein.
Oh,
God,
okay.
that name's got such a bad
It
connotation
really
now.
does.
So I don't want to get into the Google stuff because they might take your podcast down if we get too deep into it. They've been known to do things like that.
I'm not scared of them.
No,
Come at me, Google.
no, don't say that.
I love Google
You,
Workspace.
you need to take the stoic approach.
No, honestly, so so I'm torn on Google. I love Google Workspace much more than Microsoft 365, and not from an administrator perspective, from a user perspective. Okay, from an administrator perspective, I think Microsoft is much more secure and has much more capabilities. But from a user perspective, Google is like Apple to me, where it just works. You know what I mean? Um, so I really, I say come at me, Google, but I like Google. I don't have anything against you guys. Um, we,
Well,
we are, no, please go ahead.
one thing I'll point out there is that Google started in the web, right? And
Hmm.
Microsoft didn't. So Microsoft's been building the airplane while they're flying it, getting out to a web platform. So
Hmm.
it's natural that you're going to not have as seamless as an experience as you might feel you get from Google. So I think we should understand that as well.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, hey, we're like way over on time, but I have one last question, Brian, and it's a fun one. Are you still wearing your AI necklace?
No,
What
I got
happened?
so I actually so I found another one. I found actually two other ones that I ordered because
Why am I not surprised?
and I'm gonna try them out. This one was just too expensive. It was like 19 bucks a month, and I wasn't getting
Hmm.
the value out of it. Like I was wondering, like, why can't I just open up Copilot on my phone and use that instead, or have it record and then transcribe or whatever? I mean, it is nice just to have it on your neck, but it was too expensive. I actually reached out to the CEO and had a conversation with him about it,
Why
and
does that not surprise me either?
because I was trying to understand why is it so expensive, and maybe, and I even pointed out these other options. I was like, why wouldn't I go use these other options? You tell me what's different about your product that's going to make me want to stick with yours, because it's brand spanking new, so it's not perfect, and you're already charging this much money. Like, you're charging the same amount that I could pay for Copilot or Meta AI or a lot of these other AIs that give me a lot more value. And the only thing he can come back with was he keeps all the, he doesn't use the data for any training, so it's all private. And then I was like, so you're selling this AI model, how are you training it then if you're not using any of the training from all your end users that are sitting here literally training your AI for you, and how are you going to grow a better AI? How are you going to make it smarter so that it improves over time?
He
And
didn't
so
have a
that,
good answer, did he?
well, they're doing their own training, but they're not using crowdsourcing for training. And in my
Foolish.
really, in my opinion, all AI should be open source. Like I don't trust open AI at all. The fact they started out nonprofit, open source, now they're closed source and they're all about profit. I do not like that. You can't see how they're training their AI. It's behind a curtain. And so I think AI really needs to be open source as far as the model goes. But you can't make as much money off of it that way. So I'm okay with sharing my training data if I know it's going to improve the AI. I'm still battling with, well, what data is it collecting? What data is it not collecting? And understanding that better, because there's a lot of things that could be said just for a placebo, button that you're pressing, telling yourself it's private when maybe it really isn't. But in all honesty, we've got Alexas out there, we've got our phone listening to us all day. Not going to get into what Google's doing because I don't want your podcast to get banned. That stuff is already happening, right? And I'm using AI to help cut through a lot of the narratives about whether or not that stuff is happening. And the problem is when you have a closed source model that's for profit, it's driven by special interests. It's driven by people wanting to make more profit. These people also want narratives to continue that might be false. And so you start to trust even using the AI in the first place of whether or not you're getting factual data back. Is it going to be just like a Google search where you're searching for something that is there and it's purposely not coming up? So yeah, back to your question. I got rid of that one. I did have a talk with the CEO to try to figure it out a little bit more. I'm trying out these two other ones with a stoic approach. But I love that idea. Now, these other ones, one of them's completely free, which tells me they're probably collecting anything and everything, because how do you offer a free service? The other one charges you per minute, which is even more expensive. So it's like, hey, I'm leaving yours that's unlimited $19 a month because I like this other one that charges me per minute. Doesn't make sense, right?
So I gotta say, have you used Fathom, that AI recorder for Zoom and all that?
Love that company. We stopped using Copilot for our meetings because Fathom has a better hyper focus around delivering value for meetings. And so we've moved to that in our company for now. I've got a meeting with them next week to talk about a lot of security questions that I have to see whether or not we would refer this to our clients. We're kind of POCing it right now. But I even invested in the company in their last series. And I've talked to their CEO and developed a relationship with the CEO as well. So I love what they're doing, 100%.
I want Fathom for my life.
Yeah.
I want Fathom on a necklace. I want to be able to have it. You know, and this is me just spitballing. Push a button to start and stop meetings or what have you, so that way it can summarize different parts of my day for me. Because man, I love Fathom. It has made my life a whole lot easier. The only thing I think it's missing, it for me at least, is the ability to like link up to a to do app of some sort to take those action items and put them in my to do list.
Yeah. That's a great idea for Fathom, actually, as kind of a next product. I would say I definitely don't like it that it's listening all day long. That was the other one that I got rid of. It just listened all day long. There was no stop start to it. Like, unless you
Hmm.
went it, and I guess you can go into the app maybe and disconnect it or something. I like the idea of, because I run my life based on a calendar. And so I've got two things where AI could understand when it should be listening. One of them is look at my calendar and have me tag which time frames in my day based on my appointments I want you to be listening.
Hmm.
And then you could also do it GPS based, right? So
Hmm.
maybe you're running a bunch of errands and you don't want it to be running based on a GPS location, right? That would be another thing I'd want to have, because I don't really like the idea of having to remember to stop it all the time. But that would be the fallback, right? And that is one of them I ordered. It is a stop button. The other thing I'm intrigued about is I just bought the new Apple Watch, the Ultra 2, and I'm interested to see what type of AI capabilities that might have. Because I also like the idea of just having it on my wrist and being able to flip up or something, or give it a command. I mean, commands are kind of clunky. Maybe press a button on my watch, you know?
Apple Intelligence, realistically, you're not going to see anything truly useful out of it on the watch for probably until February, March.
Yeah. That's what I was reading. There wasn't really anything out of the box yet, but I at least wanted to get the hardware, the new hardware. Because my old watch is, it's like 3 generations older. They wouldn't even give me any trade-in value for it.
Yeah, I'm wearing a Series 7 right now, and it's fine.
Yeah. And then I got the new iPhone 16 as well. So while I'm trying out these necklace type, AI devices, I feel like ultimately it's going to be something I want Apple to handle for me, because I've already
Me
got an
too.
Apple Watch and an Apple phone. So what might Apple come out with, that if there is a necklace, or if it can just be part of the watch?
Mhm.
The future I see with AI is there's not going to be one huge all-encompassing AI. There's going to be, personal AI. Like ideally, everyone has their own personal AI that knows everything about them, and also acts as their gatekeeper to
Mhm.
share information with other AI or humans. And so you become almost symbiotic with your personal AI, because it's got to know everything about you to truly protect you. It can't know less than the threat actor's AI. And then you're going to have, like, the company you work for is going to have a business AI, right? In my mind, that's Microsoft. They're really the leaders right now in AI that's really good at business applications.
Mhm.
So you go to work for your company, and you set up a relationship between your AI and the company's AI, and your AI knows what to share and not to share, but it's automating a lot of the things you'd have to do normally from a personal level. MFA, for example, right? I mean, is that even going to be even a thing? Will be passwordless at some point in time, I hope. Right now we're moving to tokens, but maybe your token is your watch and your AI at that point. Your own personal AI is your token, assuming it can't be duplicated. That's where maybe something like blockchain comes into play. Who knows?
Oh man, I thought I was out. I thought I was over here in blockchain.
There's
I
some
thought we were
useful
done with that
applications.
buzzword.
It's got some usefulness to it. I'll tell you what. I'm moving a bunch of cash over to USDC, digital currency. I get 5%. I get a monthly report of this interest I'm getting that I was definitely not getting with my savings account in my bank. That they the bank, by the way, even though you see your money sitting in the bank account, it's not really there.
Mhm.
If they leave money in the bank, they're not doing their business model properly. They're immediately lending on that money. So it's a really fragile system we have right now. So I do think digital currency, which uses blockchain technology, so you're not going to stop hearing about it, is going to help balance, the banking system in the future. And in fact, every big bank I know of right now is coming out with their own digital currency. I don't know. We're going off on all these tangents. What was the original question? AI necklace.
I think the original question was, do you guys get hurricanes in California? No, we were talking about the AI necklace thing, and no, you answered the question, man. So I appreciate that. And and we could talk about AI probably for hours, but we're not going to. And I do want to, um, before we sign off, I want to say one last thing, and it's you mentioned earlier that you're okay with AI using your training data, and I just want to clarify that you're not saying that you're okay with AI having open access to all of your confidential documents and your IP and all that stuff. You're just
Correct.
okay with them having access to the training data, which is very different.
Thank you for clarifying that because that could be taken out of context. You are correct there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the last thing I need is for you to be on a soundbite somewhere.
Yeah. Well, they'll take sound bites anyway. I mean, we've got. All right, last thing. I'm working with a stealth company right now. They're in stealth
Mhm.
mode, I should say, where we're setting up vishing because I've done enough of these podcasts. You have. Threat actors are going to be able to copy our voice and literally call people we know and get them to try to do things with a
Mhm.
normal phone call where the person really thinks they're talking to us. And so that's going to be the next revolution, I think, when it comes to security training, is this idea of, are we preparing everyone in the world for getting a call out of the blue? It could even have a masked phone number. It looks like that person's phone number, sounds like them, where they're going to get sucked into doing something they regret, right? So
Hmm.
that's one thing too to understand is, our data is already out there. We've all got a digital footprint, and when the threat actors really start harnessing AI, no human SOC, no human IR team is going to be able to keep up with the advancement. We're going to have to use AI ourselves to protect ourselves, and it's got to know enough about us. It's got to know more than the threat actors AI knows about us. Ultimately,
That's a really interesting thought. That um, great. Now I'm going to have nightmares about people using my voice. Thanks.
well, and they'll get to videos too pretty soon. Videos are a little easier to tell that they aren't real, right?
Hmm. Did you see that video of Arnold Schwarzenegger doing that? What was it? An '80s song? I don't remember what one.
I
I
haven't seen
think
that yet.
I think Kyle Christensen posted it, or
Oh, maybe I
one
did
one
see
of
it.
the cybersecurity guys posted it. Will Brooks, that's who posted it.
Okay.
I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes because now it's going to bother me, and now he's going to get at least 3 more views on that post thanks to me. All right.
Is
Um,
it is it weird that I actually want to get a Neuralink as well?
I'm torn. I'm between wanting one and thinking that's the mark of the beast. So I totally I want to be able, especially because I've got these neck issues, right? So I'm totally all about like what can I do to, I don't know, make my life easier if the rest of my spine and the rest of my bones all seize up. Am I going to be stuck in a wheelchair? I won't be able to do this into that thing in the side because my neck doesn't move. So, how can I control this stuff? So trust me, I'm all about embedding technology into me. I'm just not sure if I want it to be Elon Musk's technology because he just seems to have gone off the deep end. And I don't even mean politically. Okay, we'll just skip all of that. He
Yeah.
just, I don't know, something about like something, a switch was flipped around the time he bought Twitter, or maybe even just around the time of the pandemic. He started manipulating the stock market and Dogecoin and all that stuff, and then he buys Twitter, and then he just kind of went off the deep end. I don't know.
Yeah, I see that as him pointing out vulnerabilities that we were taking for granted.
Oh, sure. And I'm all about that, but because you look at what Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert did. Gosh, was it 20 years ago now when they made a super PAC
Yeah.
and all that stuff, and Stephen Colbert was running for president, and Jon Stewart was running a super PAC, and it was It was fantastic. It was very eye opening, educational, and I feel like they revealed some vulnerabilities in the political system, if you will. So I'm all about people finding creative ways to educate the masses. I don't know if he was intentionally trying to educate as much as he was trying to take advantage.
Well, maybe by the time I get a Neuralink, I can just ask my own personal AI if it's safe, and then it will let me know.
That'll do it. AI would never lie to you or anything. Yeah. Brian, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on here and having a
Yep.
chat with me. I can't wait to do it again where maybe next time let's just dive into AI and make
Sure.
that be the conversation next time, man.
I'd love that. I'll get my notes arranged better too, so I'm not thinking off the top of my head as much when it comes to AI. For sure.
All good. Cool.
Yep.
Have a good one, guys.